it's hard to believe former President Jimmy Carter passed away yesterday
Yeah.
at the age of 100.
Wow.
What a life.
What a life he lived.
Yeah, from the Navy to the peanut farm to the Georgia governor's mansion and, of course, the White House.
I mean, he really left behind a remarkable legacy, you know. Setting aside the complexities of his presidency, he was a tireless advocate for peace and human rights, driven by his deep faith. And his post-presidency work with Habitat for Humanity and his Nobel Peace Prize really cemented that.
Yeah, it's amazing to think how much he accomplished after leaving office. But today I'd like to focus on a specific moment during his presidency that, looking back, feels incredibly relevant to our current times. His crisis of confidence speech from July 15, 1979.
Oh yeah, that speech is fascinating because it really cuts to the core of some challenges we're still grappling with today. Economic anxieties, a sense of national unease, and a lack of trust in institutions.
Yeah, let's rewind back to 1979. What was going on in the country that led President Carter to deliver this kind of speech?
Well, imagine a country going through its second energy crisis in a decade. Inflation was out of control, gas was scarce, and people were waiting in long lines at the pumps, just hoping they could fill up their tanks. On top of that, there was a deep sense of disillusionment with the government stemming from Watergate and the Vietnam War.
It sounds a lot like the uncertainty we're facing today.
Yeah, the parallels are definitely there.
Yeah.
Back then, Carter's approval ratings were plummeting, and he needed to find a way to connect with the American people and inspire action. He decided to cancel a planned speech on energy and instead held a domestic summit at Camp David, inviting people from all walks of life to share their thoughts on the nation's problems.
Yeah, I've read that what he heard during those conversations at Camp David deeply affected him.
Absolutely. He was struck by the depth of pessimism and the feeling of powerlessness that many people expressed. It wasn't just about economic hardship. There was this underlying sense of unease, a loss of faith in the American dream, and a feeling that the country had lost its way.
He called it a crisis of confidence, eroding the nation's spirit.
And he didn't shy away from challenging the American people in his speech.
Right.
One of the most striking quotes was, "In a nation that was proud of hard work, strong families, close-knit communities, and our faith in God, too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns."
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement, even for today.
Yeah.
He was taking aim at the very heart of American consumerism and materialism.
He was challenging the idea that material possessions alone could bring happiness and fulfillment. He argued that America's problems weren't just economic or political, they were also moral and spiritual.
It seems like he was trying to spark a national conversation about values and priorities.
Yeah.
But how did the public react to this message?
Surprisingly, the speech initially resonated with a lot of Americans. His approval ratings went up significantly in some polls. People were hungry for that kind of honesty, for a leader who was willing to challenge them and acknowledge the difficult realities they were facing.
So it seemed like he had struck a chord, at least for a moment.
He did, but unfortunately he made a major misstep just a few days later. He fired half of his cabinet, which created an impression of chaos and instability.
That seems like a strange decision given the message of unity and leadership he had just conveyed in his speech.
It definitely contradicted his call for a collective effort to address the crisis of confidence. It was perceived as a sign of weakness and indecision, and it ultimately undermined his ability to capitalize on the goodwill he had generated with the speech.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
interesting how his opponents, particularly Ronald Reagan, capitalized on the crisis of confidence theme.
Right.
Reagan reframed it as malaise and offered a much more optimistic vision for America's future.
Yeah, it's ironic because Carter never actually used the word malaise, but it stuck and it became a defining label for his presidency.
It's a classic example of how political messaging can shape public perception, even if it's not entirely accurate.
So even though Carter's speech initially resonated with people, his own actions and his opponent's rhetoric ultimately overshadowed his message. Unfortunately, that's what happened. But here's what I find really compelling. Even though he was a one-term president, Carter's post-presidency was extraordinary.
Yeah.
He dedicated himself to humanitarian work, earning a Nobel Peace Prize, and really becoming a moral voice on the world stage.
His work with Habitat for Humanity is truly inspiring. He didn't just talk about helping others, he rolled up his sleeves and got to work.
Exactly. And that commitment to service, to making a tangible difference in the world, speaks volumes about his character.
Yeah, it's a powerful example of how one person can make a real impact even after leaving the political arena.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to the present day and the striking parallels between what Carter was talking about in 1979 and what we're experiencing now. We're seeing similar economic anxieties, political polarization, and that same sense of unease and distrust in institutions.
There's a feeling that the American dream is slipping away for many people,
Yeah.
that the system isn't working for them, and this sense of disillusionment can be really fertile ground for division and extremism.
You're absolutely right. And when you look at recent polling data, it echoes the anxieties Carter was highlighting back then. People are feeling pessimistic about the future, and they're losing faith in the ability of our institutions to address the challenges we're facing. For example, one poll found that a majority of Americans agree with the statement, the American economy is rigged to advantage the rich and powerful. That's a direct reflection of what Carter was saying about self-indulgence and consumption back in '79.
It's like history is rhyming, as Mark Twain might have said. But if we acknowledge that we're in a similar moment of national unease, what can we learn from Carter's attempt to address it? What did he get right, and what might he have done differently?
That's a great question. I think one of the things Carter got right was his willingness to speak honestly about the challenges the country was facing. He didn't sugarcoat things or try to pretend everything was fine. He acknowledged the pain and the frustration that many Americans were feeling.
He also challenged people to look inward, to examine their own role in contributing to the problems, and to consider what they could do to be part of the solution.
That's a really important point. He wasn't just pointing fingers or blaming others. He was calling for a sense of shared responsibility, a recognition that we're all in this together and that individual actions matter.
He also emphasized the importance of values and principles, of moving beyond self-interest and embracing a more ethical and less materialistic approach to life.
That message is more relevant than ever. We're living in a time of hyper-individualism and instant gratification where it's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of material possessions and external validation. Carter was urging people to reconnect with deeper values, things like community service and a sense of purpose beyond themselves.
But he also received criticism for being too pessimistic, for focusing too much on the problems and not offering enough solutions. Do you think that criticism was fair?
There's definitely a balance to be struck. It's important to acknowledge the challenges we're facing, but it's equally important to offer hope and a vision for a better future. I think where Carter might have fallen short was in articulating that vision in a way that inspired people and gave them something to rally around.
He talked about conservation and sacrifice. But those aren't necessarily the most motivating themes. People need to feel like they're working towards something positive, not just giving things up.
You're right. And that's something we need to keep in mind as we navigate our current challenges. We need to offer solutions that are not only practical, but also inspiring and aspirational. We need to paint a picture of a future that people want to be a part of, a future that's worth striving for.
So how do we translate Carter's call for a crisis of confidence into something that resonates with people today and motivates them to action? What does that look like in a world that's vastly different from 1979?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I don't pretend to have all the answers. But I think there are a few key principles we can draw from Carter's message that are still relevant today.
Let's explore those principles in more detail, because if we can understand what Carter was trying to achieve, perhaps we can find a way to apply those lessons to our current moment and chart a path forward that addresses the anxieties and divisions we're facing today.
Yeah, you mentioned some key principles we can learn from Carter's message. What comes to mind?
One principle that stands out is the importance of honesty and authenticity. Carter wasn't afraid to level with the American people about the severity of the challenges they faced.
Right.
And he challenged them to take responsibility for their role in creating those challenges.
Yeah, honesty can be tough to hear sometimes, especially when it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves or our society.
Right.
But it's essential for building trust and fostering a sense of shared purpose.
Absolutely. If we want to address the deep-seated anxieties and divisions we're facing today, we need to start by acknowledging the realities of our situation. We can't solve problems we're not willing to admit exist. Another key principle from Carter's message is the idea of shared sacrifice. He called on Americans to make changes in their daily lives, to conserve energy, and to prioritize the common good over individual gain.
Yeah, this is a challenging concept in our current culture of instant gratification and hyper-individualism.
Right.
But it's crucial for creating a sustainable future. We need to recognize that our individual choices have consequences that extend far beyond ourselves.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, our responsibility to each other, and to future generations. Carter believed that facing a common challenge could actually bring people together and create a sense of national unity.
He saw shared sacrifice as a way to rekindle a sense of community and shared purpose. It wasn't just about giving things up, it was about contributing to something larger than oneself.
He also emphasized the importance of values and principles as a guiding force in our lives. He believed that lasting solutions couldn't be found in material possessions or political ideologies alone. He called for a return to core values like hard work, family, community, and faith.
Yeah, those values provide a moral compass, a framework for making decisions and navigating complex situations. They offer a sense of meaning and purpose that transcends the fleeting allure of material possessions or political power.
And those values resonate across generations and cultures. They provide a common ground that can help us bridge divides and find common purpose.
Yeah, it's fascinating how Carter, despite facing so much criticism and political setbacks, never lost that sense of optimism and that unwavering belief in the power of human goodness.
His faith was a driving force for him, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
It seemed to sustain him through difficult times and inspire his commitment to service.
Absolutely. He saw his faith as a call to action, a responsibility to use his gifts and his influence to make a positive difference in the world.
And he certainly lived that out in his post-presidency work.
Yeah.
Building houses with Habitat for Humanity, monitoring elections in fledgling democracies, mediating conflicts, working to eradicate diseases. He never stopped striving to make the world a better place.
It's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't about holding a position of power. It's about using your influence, however big or small, to serve others and make a positive impact.
And that's a legacy that we can all aspire to, regardless of our political beliefs or our station in life. We all have the capacity to contribute to the common good, to make a difference in our communities and in the world around us.
It's about finding those small acts of courage and kindness in our everyday lives. It's about choosing hope over cynicism, action over apathy, and connection over division.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, and that even small gestures of compassion and service can ripple outwards and create a positive change. You know, even though it was delivered over 45 years ago, Carter's Crisis of Confidence speech has given us a lot to think about today.
It has.
It reminds us that the challenges we face as a nation and as a global community
Yeah.
run deep, but it also serves as a call to action, urging us to tap into that inner strength and resilience that we all possess.
And let's not forget,
Yeah,
it's a reminder that true leadership isn't about holding a position of power.
no,
It's about inspiring others to believe in something larger than themselves.
it's about leading with integrity,
It is,
with humility, and a deep commitment to service.
for sure. It's about acknowledging that we're all interconnected and that our collective future depends on our willingness to confront challenges with courage, compassion, and hope.
And as we reflect on President Carter's life and legacy, perhaps his greatest gift to us is this. Even when faced with adversity, we can choose to believe in the possibility of a better tomorrow.
I like that.
And through our actions, both individually and collectively,
Yeah.
we can work to make that possibility a reality. It's a powerful message that transcends time and circumstance.
It does.
As we continue to navigate the complexities of our current world,
Right.
it's comforting to find inspiration in Carter's words and his unwavering belief in the human spirit.
It is. Speaking of inspiration, I
Uh-huh.
think the song Soldier On by Oasis
Oh yeah,
perfectly captures the spirit of resilience and hope we've been discussing today.
it's a reminder that even when times are tough, we can keep moving forward,
We can.
one step at a time.
Yeah,
And that's a lesson worth holding on to.
absolutely.
No matter what lies ahead,